Dude, you are getting well. Dudes, welcome everybody, all men and women, dudes of all kinds, to this podcast special episode today on unlocking your worth, transforming money and mindset. What does that mean? So much of our self-worth can be tied up with money. Money's an energy, and so much of this is made up. And yet, so many of us are still struggling today more than ever. Why is that? We're going to get inside of this with one of my favorite people in the world, and she just so happens to be an expert on money, is Money Coach Kris. Welcome to the show, Kris. Great to have you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're here. Thanks for making the time in your schedule. I know your time is valuable, as is everyone who's listening. So if you're listening live, thank you for being here. And if you're listening on the recording after, thank you for watching. Either one, I want to encourage you to ask us questions live, as Kris and I are going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to dive in right now. So Kris, how did you become a money coach? What inspired this? And how did you realize like money and mindset were your areas of expertise?
So it's interesting. I feel that this has become a passion of mine more because of me in my journey. So I'm doing it to help myself. Right.
Right on.
So I've been asked this question a lot, like, what struggles have you had? And I've had a lot. And even though by trade, I'm a financial planner, it doesn't mean that I always have had a healthy relationship with money. There's been plenty of times in my life that I've had an unhealthy relationship with money. And so how do I show up? And how am I supposed to help my clients, my friends, my families, the world if I have an unhealthy relationship with money?
Oh, I can totally understand that. I know I didn't get all the tools with money that I wanted or needed growing up. Could you share a specific moment when you realized your relationship with money wasn't healthy?
Yeah, so I actually have one that I was thinking about. So it started, I don't know, maybe 17, 18 years ago. There was a time in my life, I'd already been in the financial industry for a while. And I was in this place where my kids were young, and my husband at the time and we did okay financially, but we were at that place. And I don't know if you or anybody on here has ever been in the place where you don't make enough to get any kind of governmental assistance, but you make too much to actually, like, you make too much to get any kind of government financial assistance, but you don't make enough to actually afford to pay for everything.
Oh,
Right.
I've been there in many decades. I feel like a lot of actors or any freelancers or maybe a lot of families out there can relate.
Yeah. So I had this period where my daughter was in first grade and she needed help with the tutoring. And there was this program, it was great. And it cost $10,000. And if you qualified financially, it could be free. And we found out that we made $3,000 too much to get that free thing. And at the time, we didn't have the $10,000 sitting around to just pay for that. So I actually went to my boss and I said, hey, can I have a decrease in salary? That would just solve all my problems. And he said no. And instead, he gave me a raise, not a very big raise, but a small raise. But it was the conversation after that that really changed everything that I was doing. See, before that, I had brought to him the book called The Secret. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, the law of action, and we get to create the things that we want to create. And it's all comes down to like our mindset of things. And so he reminded me that doesn't just work for everybody else. It could also work for me. And so that was powerful. And I was like, okay, so maybe my perspective of this situation is I'm not looking at it in the right way, right?
So let me say, here's a person you're helping that you gave a book to. He was your boss. You gave him The Secret. And then sometime later, you're struggling financially, you need to qualify. I've helped a friend who was trying to qualify for housing, and they were an artist, and they actually somehow made too much, but they couldn't afford to live or pay rent.
Mhm.
And so they're trying to figure out how to qualify for what they needed. And so your boss didn't say, yeah, I'm going to help you out in the way that you're asking for. He said, no, in fact, remember that thing you did for me? I'm going to turn that right back around and do that for you. And you got a surprise of a raise.
Yes, yes. Now, that raise at that time wasn't enough to really help, and that I was mad at that. I was really frustrated. But then that really shifted a lot in me as far as, okay, how can I take control? What can I do to be better? And I want to point out, so that was, probably 15 to 17 years ago. And at that time, I was maybe making like $35,000 a year. And since then, I have transformed my relationship with money, my mindset with some ups and downs, and hasn't been a straight, hey, everything's great. But then I got to a point in my life where I was making $30,000 a month or more. And it all sometimes shifts. Like, we are taught certain things in our lives. What we believe about money comes from the experiences that we have, and also what we're taught by our friends, our family, society, right? And I help people unlock what's missing, like understand where they value money and how money can work for them, and then what kind of life do they want to live, and how can we help achieve that?
Well, that's a really great way of putting it. To see how money can actually work for us, in a time that didn't. Um, I'm curious, why do you think so many of us struggle with money, or knowing our worth, both personally and financially? Like, why do you think we don't know how to use this?
I think there's a lot of people first out there that have a great relationship with money, and it could be fine, but it could be better. A lot of times we struggle with, well, I can't do that. She can do it. Ben can do it. Chris can do it. So and so can do it, but I can't do it. That's not me. I don't feel worthy. And I realized too, when I was a child, and a lot of our money stories and our money truths come from what we experienced as children, right? And so for me, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I felt like I was stuck in this box of I can only do these things. And when I realized that, I realized as I'm going through this process, I had a coach tell me, well, why do you think you're going through this? Like, why do you think you're doing this? And a lot of times when we're trying to empower and impact other people, it's really within ourselves. Right. And so a lot of struggle is, I can't do that because, well, what if you could do that? So what if the opposite was true of what you think, right? What if you can create whatever you want to create? I have an exercise that I do with my clients where I say, write down 25 ways that you can create income. And it's fun because some of them are, yeah, I would never do that.
Yeah,
Responses are insane.
yeah.
Then I ask people, what if you could do that?
Hmm.
What if you can create more? And it's not even about like how much money are you like making as much money, but how do you want to live? So the amount of money that you make is irrelevant. The amount of zeros after the money is irrelevant. What's relevant
Okay.
is, what are you trying to feel? How are you trying to live?
Hmm. Can
Because
you say more about why these numbers aren't relevant? Because I'm sure there's people out there like, well, that's not what my landlord says,
right, especially in the world that we're living in right now, when I say
Yeah.
that, people probably are getting mad, but it's more also about how you're managing your money and how you're managing your lifestyle. In
Hmm.
today, right now, as we're speaking, rents are high, housing is high, food is high, gas is high, everything is, it's hard to live. um, and when I say the money doesn't matter, like a lot of times too, this is what I try to get at. We build our life around our income, right? I make this much money, so this is the kind of house I can have. This is the kind of car I can have. But I challenge people to say, well, what kind of life do you want to live? And then let's create income around that instead of the opposite, right?
Hmm.
So now if you're in your 40s and you're already living this life and your expenses are over $100,000 a year, then it's a little bit more difficult. But you can always impact and make changes in different ways. So in the world that we're living in right now, and if you're working for somebody and you have a W-2 income, a salary or something like that, and it's hard, what else can you do? And I want to make a statement. My daughter, who's living in New York City right now, who is 24 years old, said to me one day, Mom, in order to make it in New York City, you got to have a full-time job and 2 side hustles. So I'm like, great. What's your 2 side hustles then? Right. So like knowing that, knowing the game, knowing what's happening, how else can you create that money? And a lot of times we're like, well, I can't because of. Well, we all have the same amount of hours in the day, right? And so when I say the money, the amount doesn't matter. What matters is how you're living your life. And that's true, because if you're living above your means, how can you cut back, or how can you create more money? Don't let your salary stop you from trying to figure out other ways to create more money. And if you're not entrepreneurial minded, if you're not like that, go see if you can ask for a raise. Look for different positions that you can do. And then get clear on how you want to live. And then we can help you manage your cash flow and money that way.
I love that. One thing I'm taking away from that is you could go ask for a raise.
Yes.
And also you said something that, my mom used to always say to me as a kid, and it still rings true today. And that's like, don't live outside your means.
Mm-hmm.
I had a habit of overspending a lot when I was younger. And I knew not to, but I always felt like money was so available. And somehow I always created it, but like I always spent outside my means. So I was always in debt, always perpetually scraping by. And I got really good at that. But I realized I didn't even have the self-worth. Even as I wasn't a millionaire, but let's say like it felt like it when you're 20 years old and you're making 6 figures, it feels like millions of dollars. So I had 6 figures, but not much more as the Dell dude. Right. And yet my self-worth, I was confident what I was doing, but my self-worth and self-esteem were so low. And I actually ended up, while I paid off a lot of debts in school and college and things, I like, it wasn't too long after that I actually ended up in debt. And I was just baffled and so ashamed. And so I was, as we look at money and mindset today, I was thinking about those people that like, they know how to do, they know what to do. Maybe their spending habits over, but maybe even at that time, actually, I was scraping by. Sometimes I would just ride my bike and carry the food from the television set that I was starring in that day and use that for the rest of my meals, to get creative. But you mentioned a side hustle, and I'm wondering, like, what are some of the tools or practices that let's start with this. What are some of the tools and practices maybe that we could build? I say we is like my old self really dealing with that then, but also newly, there's new business challenges always. What are some of the tools or practices that we could use to start to begin to build a healthier relationship with money, or one that really, works for us? Like, how do we actually change those habits to spend in our means? How do we get clear on, if it feels like we're always under earning, right? And you said mentioning like starting a side hustle, like any of those things, any tips or practices or tools that you have for people who may feel stuck in those places?
Yeah. So when I work with clients, I ask a lot of questions to help them discover what their relationship with money is. But there's some things that I think I could give to the audience today. When we're spending money, a lot of times, if you're at the store, you're out and you're like, oh, I need that. Like, why? So I have an awareness journal that I created, and I ask people these 3 questions. One, when you're buying anything that you're spending money on, I don't care if it's $1 or $10,000. I want you to ask yourself, is this a need or a want? Did this have a positive impact on you or somebody else? And is this purchase in line with your goals and values? So for
Okay,
me,
so we're going to slow that down a little bit because everybody's been there. You're like, oh, I need that.
yes.
Sometimes there's a lot of things that I think my house needs, like a hose is one of them. We need
Mhm.
a new hose. It's like, but there's always other things I've got. And it's like, do we really need a new hose? I mean, not really. I would like to have a new one, but there were other things that were actually more priorities. Like there were some bills that needed to be paid. And I'm thinking I need to go get a hose. Right. So that might be a good example of that. So I
Yeah.
love, you said an awareness journal. So I want to slow that down. And on
Mhm.
an awareness journal, like what are the 3 things again?
So I want you to ask yourself, is this a need or a want?
Okay. 1, is this a need or a want?
Right. And if
Okay.
it's a want, it's okay. I'm not saying that you can't spend money on something that's a want.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. Just I want you to be aware. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing I ask is this purchase going to have a positive impact on you or somebody else?
Hmm.
Okay. How's it impacting somebody's life? And then the third question is, and probably one of the most important, is this purchase in line with your goals and values?
Hmm.
Okay. So we start with those things. And because let's say it's a hose. Is your hose currently broken, or do you just want something that's lighter or works better?
It
Right.
is broken. It broke. Yeah.
So if it's broken, then okay, maybe you do need that. Do I need it right now? What am I going to be using the hose for? Right? Is it something that I have to get right now? And is it in line with my goals and values? Now, if you have a garden, probably it is. But going back to either buying a hose or paying like your electric or water bill, you might want to pay your bill first, right? And then say,
And
oh,
maybe you just put water in a watering bucket and save on water and go water your plants and help the earth and your pocketbook too.
exactly,
Right. My
exactly.
mom actually does all of her watering from the rain buckets, right? Just
Oh,
sourced from that. So she never actually has to use running water to water her plants. It's amazing. So that
oh,
was one thing.
yeah. So also when you're thinking about like, how is this in line with my goals and values, right? So, or is there another way that we could do that?
Mhm.
So kind of adding on to that, like when you're purchasing something too, or if you're already going through your expenses, I also ask a fourth question sometimes is, if you're spending money on this, what is that thing doing for you? And is there
Mm.
any other way that you can accomplish that same task or same goal doing something differently?
Mhm.
And I ask that a lot more now with AI because AI, if we can leverage AI and partner with AI, AI can do a lot of things for us to free up our time or allow us to not spend so much money on something. On the flip side of that, though, what if it's a really cool thing and it can free up so much of your time and it costs more money? What is that going to do for you? And that
Mm.
actually, sometimes spending more money might be more impactful because it's actually moving something forward for you, right?
Mm.
So I don't look at getting always the cheapest thing. I look at what is that doing for you? And sometimes spending a little bit more money might be more impactful than wasting your money on something that's not really working for you.
Yeah, you're speaking some wisdom here. I'm picking up on it. I'm actually I was trying to pull up a reference, but is there say that last thing again about how is this working for you? Because it's landing. I think it's worth saying again.
Yeah. So like when you're looking at something, I'm actually going to use paying or finding an assistant or hiring somebody as a good
Mhm.
example. Let's say that you need somebody to help you run something, do something for you, and you're deciding between these two people. One might cost you $40,000, and another one might cost you $80,000. But look at what those two people are going to do for you. Is the $40,000 person going to actually help you move forward with what you're doing? Or will spending double that, will that person actually bring in more revenue for you or help free up your time so you can spend more time creating revenue, right? So the
Yeah.
same if it's a software tool that you're using, something for your house, like what is that doing for you? And sometimes spending more money actually is more beneficial, but not always.
Okay, great. Thank you for saying that again. That tuned me back into something else. A point I wanted to just emphasize with you there is that, how do you have your money work for you? That's what I'm hearing is like, what's the highest, best use of this dollar, right? If I have this much money, if I invest in something better, will it, yield a better result? And sometimes you get what you pay for. I think of, not always, right? Like you can make your own clothes or get some cool stuff, but often with like technology, one of the things we talked about before podcasting was like, what mic should you get? Well, you can get one anywhere from $20 to $10,000, $2,000, let's say. Realistically, like that's a 200 to 2,000 is a pretty realistic range of base to like higher end. And so where do you go if you're starting, right? So you look at quality, you look at what's going to be the thing, and will it actually last? Like, sometimes you get something and it's cheaper, but it actually is cheap. Your clothes fall apart or the thing doesn't work. And so I hear my grandfather, like, they don't make them like they used to. If something's made well, they're designed well, it could last a really long time. Like a great pair of shoes, for instance, is something you can invest in, right? Maybe more expensive, but actually saves you so much. And if your feet are the ground upon which your entire body is based in your health, and so that may be an important thing to invest in, right? If your feet affect your knees, which affect your back, which affect your whole life, So I think about that. That's one thing I'm getting out of this. So I really appreciate you talking about how to have your money work for you.
Yes, for sure. And at the same time, sometimes you realize you're spending too much for something. They're not helping you. Sometimes you don't need that. And your life can change. So being aware of what you're spending, being aware of what you're investing in, if it's something that you were doing, I hear this a lot with some of my clients, like, oh, I've been doing that for 5 years. Great. Is it still actually helping you?
Okay, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result equals insanity. And I've been asking myself, like, am I doing the same thing, trying to expect something different?
Yes.
I want to switch gears real quick because I know we have limited time together, and I want to get as much value as possible. What I want to focus on mindset for a second again. Are there any tools or practices, and I know it's very customized to the individual, and it sounds like you have like one of your strengths is speaking to the individual's needs, creating a plan for them. But what tools or practices have you found effective that help people shift from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset?
That's a great question. And everybody, again, can be different. But I always like to start with a blank slate, right? So anytime I'm working with anybody, and for anybody out there, I want you to remember 3 things always. One is everything is made up. 2, there are no rules. And 3, no one is in charge. So then, if that's true, we get to create the life that we want to live. We create our own rules that we want to live by, and our rules dictates who's in charge of our life.
Everything is made up. There's no one in charge.
And there's no rules.
And there's no rules.
And so I say that, and then when I work with my clients, I make them create rules. When I say there's no rules, what I mean is because everything's made up. Money was made up. Everything is made up. So with your mindset, if you can get clear, if you can go to a neutral place, if you can just get neutral, facts are facts, take emotion out of it, take all the things away, like everything's made up. And if you can come to that place, like it can just shift all the possibilities that are there for you. A lot of times we get stuck in the past.
Cool. I like that as a tool. See what opens up for you. I'm curious to hear what people are discovering. I would say, how do you, here's a good one. What's a common misconception that people have about money and self-worth that you want to debunk? And maybe that's part of what you just said. but
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's something you see over and over that you really want to speak to.
So what I want to debunk is like having more money is going to help everything. And sometimes yes, it does, but it depends on what you're trying to create. I've also seen people that consistently like, oh, if I make this, then if I do this, then if I do that, then, and it never gets better. Instead of focusing on the money, focus on the feeling that you're creating with what you're trying to do. Right. So instead of focus on, oh, if I make 6 figures then, or if I make 7 figures then, or if I become a billionaire then, well, what can you do now? In using the term and not but. So meaning, I want to go on vacation, but I don't have any money. Instead, say, I want to go on vacation and I don't have a lot of money right now. So changing that word to from but to and, I want to start a business and I don't know how to do it. I want to start a side hustle and I don't know what I'm doing. That and changes the when you say but, I want to start a business, but then you're done. So change the word but to and then see what possible things happen. Who can help you with those journeys?
I like that. That's a great mindset shift. And if we were to put this into a bit more like practical spending terms, so let's say we we're in debt, we've got some okay, so there was someone I actually was talking to the other day around this. So they have debt, they're starting to get some money and they're an independent contractor. A lot of the people I'm coaching are creatives, independent contractors, or people just living paycheck to paycheck, but money starts to come in. What's the first thing we do with it? Is it spend it on yourself? Is it pay the bill? Is it take your partner out to dinner? Is it like how do you, when in those places, like, do you have some advice for people about where to and how to start to put that money in? Like, what's the best use of it? Like putting it in the stock market or things like that. What do you say are the great first steps?
Yeah. So for me, the great first step, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have debt, you have all these things, and you're now starting to create more income for yourself. People don't like this when I say this, but your very first thing that you need to do is save. You need to have an emergency fund, because if you do not build that up first, then you're going to keep repeating the same cycle. Right. So imagine you have so much debt, you have no emergency fund, and now you're living paycheck to paycheck, and now you get more money. If you can first be aware of what you're spending, you have to know your numbers. So know how much it costs you to run your household, know how much it costs you to run your business. And then if you have debt, I want you to make sure that you have at least 3 months of your expenses saved before you really start attacking your debt. So you would just pay all your minimums. People get mad at me because then they say, but Kris, what about all the interest I'm paying? Yes, I get it. I know. I understand. However, if we do not break the cycle of what you're continuing to do, it's never going to change. So if you took all your extra money and you just paid off all your debt and now an emergency happens, what are you going to do? You're going to go create more debt. Instead, you build your emergency fund first, and then you stop saving and then take all that money and pay off your debt, and then you go back to saving, right? And then there's rules, and everybody is going to have different rules and values for them. But my very first thing that I say is you need to save. So if it's the first time you have money coming in, save. Right now, you can create a rule for yourself that you're like, hey, I'm going to have this extra money and I know it's going to be consistent. I'm going to take 10 or 5% of that and go have some fun, because there's a great thing of having balance in life. You don't want to just always live for tomorrow. You also want to live for today. But my very first thing is save, save, save.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you one more question in the devil's advocate side of this. Like the person who, so if they're saying, well, how do I save if I'm not making enough to pay off my bills? Right. Or so what would you say, to the, I could see your clients also say, similarly, or like, what about the debt, right? If debt accrues interest quicker than savings sometimes, right. But also, like, how do you save if you're trying to pay off debt and you're saying to save first? And it seems almost counterintuitive to everything I had heard about money in the past. So I'm getting more curious about like if there's maybe a structure or a tool that you might suggest to help get some of those of us who have experienced that in the past or present to that place.
Yeah. Well, so first, like I said, you need to be aware of what your numbers are. So how much are you spending? And then going through, why are you spending? I created an exercise for people to do. I call it taking out the trash. It's literally going through all of your expenses. And do I need to be doing that? And if we can get lean in what your expenses are, then maybe even if we're saving a little bit, sometimes it's that energy behind saving. And yes, it could take time. I'm not saying that this process will happen overnight. That's the other thing, is we are very impatient humans. So being patient and saving, and again, for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, right? I'm just speaking generalities, right?
Yeah.
Now, and
I
again,
used to have, well, let me say something real quick, because I used to have a rule when I made, every time I got a paycheck, it was like 30% in the stock market, like 30%, or maybe it's like 20 stock, 20 to my savings account, like 20% on me, and then like 20% towards bills. Like I would try to split it up that way. So that I had some plans, so that because felt like I just didn't have a structure for where to put it. So I just wanted to put that in.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. And that's what I help people create, is their rules and boundaries around money. So having that.
Oh, so that's a rule and boundary that you're
Yes,
talking about.
exactly. So
Okay, I see what you're doing here.
it's the habits that we're creating too, right? So I don't care. I tell somebody, I don't care if you're saving 1%. It's something. And it's that energy of, I'm saving it. I just do not want you to touch it. So pay all your bills when you can. But if you're saving too much, like if you're like, oh, I'm going to save 20% because that's what Money Coach Kris said was awesome. But if you can't pay your electric bill because you're saving 20%, that's not a good idea. Save less. And even if you're starting with 1%, then have a rule to try to increase that so many months later. So it's starting slow. So going back to my suggestions is save first, be very patient, and be very boring. Because when we want to be fun, we want things now, we want to do sexy things with our money. You can't do that yet until you've laid your foundation, right? You can't
Okay, yes.
do that with your money until you have your foundation, because then that sexy thing might have not paid off, or you might have lost it. And then now what? So being boring at first. I know I'm a fun person by nature, but I teach people to be boring at first, build your foundation, do the consistent things, create consistently disciplined habits that you can follow every day, every week, every month, every year. And over time, you're going to have exactly what you want. And that's the misconception too. I think people are like, oh, I can do this quick. No. If you have $100,000 of debt, not including your home, and you make $200,000 a year, it's going to take you time.
Yeah. This is so good. I'm gonna just plug this even more, because I had an incredible teacher at the Actors Equity, which is maybe even changed now, building, where they were teaching money classes for independent contractors and artists. Like, and I was thinking, how the hell do I create any contingency fund when I have no idea what my, I know I can know my numbers this month, but they may be different next. So I actually started to get clear, and the coach said, track your money. So I'm hearing what you're doing. I got consistent about it. And now I got an app, and I created categories, and it's super fun. And I can write off tons of stuff at the end of the year because I've categorized it. And when there's months when I'm like, ooh, this money's feeling really tight, I can actually go look at my tracker, and I'm like, oh, no wonder, like I've like not made enough money. And I start thinking like, oh, who owes me money? And often there's like unpaid clients and invoices open, or like, things you can ask for. I learned that you can ask to have your APR lowered on your credit card, and they'll do it. You can ask to have overdraft fees removed sometimes, and they'll do it. So it's really, you can get empowered if you ask questions. So these are all the things I'm getting from you, is like remembering that there aren't rules, and ask for what you need and advocate. And I love the boring consistency clarity too. My wife and I touch base weekly on finances so that we are at least checking in with ourselves and each other to make sure that, you know, if we've got a trip coming up, are we both on the same page? Can we both afford it? Does this work for us? Sometimes we'll catch, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, actually, I forgot that we're even paying that bill monthly. So I've got to add that into my budget. Oh, I actually need to make some more money now. So getting clear about what we are spending, like you said, has been one of the most freeing things for me in the world. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Mhm. Yeah, you're welcome. And I think too, once you know what you need, it's easier. If you, I was working with a client the other day, and her income was down a little bit, and I was like, she's like, I don't even know what to do. I'm like, well, how much are you spending? And she got clear on that. And we realized she needs to create $4,000 more a month. Okay, well, what are ways that you can do that then? Now that we know, when you know what you want, it's like putting in an order. If you just say, oh, I want something sweet, and you get something sweet, but it's not what you actually want. Instead of saying, I want a raspberry smoothie with 4 blueberries added to it and a teaspoon of honey, and like super, super specific, then you get exactly what you want. But if you don't know where you're at, if you don't know what you want, how are you going to even get there?
And that's a great law of manifestation I teach and give to everyone first who subscribes to my newsletters, just like a meditation. And it's just getting clear on what you want and practicing being in that vibration, right? So thank you for this. I know we have super limited time. In a short amount of time, we have a comment from Pam. Thank you, Pam, for being here, listening and commenting. Views on transactional relationships. If you feel someone can benefit from what you have and you give them lots of stuff, gift cards, pay for everything, is better off from them, should you expect anything in return, or no, it's all a gift?
Ooh, so that's where I say I help people create rules around gifting, lending, and giving, because to me it's all the same thing. So if that's a rule for you to create, Pam, like if you are constantly paying for people, if you're constantly giving them gifts, what is your rule behind that? Are you expecting something in return? And sometimes it's not good to do that. And then we get hurt and we're like, oh man, why am I continuing to do that? And a lot of times I find with whether you're the parent or you make more money than the rest of the people in your family, you feel guilty if you're not paying for people. And I want you to know that you don't have to feel guilty on not paying for people, because you have to take care of yourself first. You ever hear, when you go on a plane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then give it to everybody else. So I want to say, Pam, if you're consistently giving and you're not receiving anything, maybe stop, unless you have this great heart and you have all the money and you have all the things and you're like, I just want to give and I'm not expecting anything in return. That's different. Right? But if you're expecting something in return, maybe stop gifting or gifting as much, or have a conversation with that person and say, hey, what are our agreements on this?
And maybe what I'm getting from Money Coach Kris is start with a conversation with yourself about, hey, what am I getting from this?
Yes.
Kris, thank you so much for your time. I know you have to go. If you had one gift to give the world today, what would you give us?
Oh, I just want to say, know your worth. Like, we are all worthy. A question that I ask people is, why do you deserve money? People don't like that word, deserve. I want you to know that everybody deserves money, because we are the only species on this earth that has to utilize money to live. No other species needs money. So you deserve money and you are worthy because you are human. And just know that.
Love it. Thank you, Kris. This has been so special. Thanks for having us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, listen to us everywhere you stream podcasts. Dude, you're getting well. We're here with Money Coach Kris. This has been amazing. Listen to the playback for all the value. Thank you, Kris. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.